What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Tuesday, June 4th, 2019. Getting into the week here, getting into the month. We have got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. That's 800-313-9443. Sam is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments, questions, and opinions here. So getting right on into it. Boy, to look at the American corporate media, you'd think that the only news story that was out there worth reporting was Trump being in London. And of course, corporate media is focusing on the protests and the negativity and the feud with Sadiq Khan. But it looks like the president and the first lady are having a really good time. They're getting the royal treatment, and they got a royal welcome from Queen Elizabeth II. And got to review the troops at Buckingham Palace and had that glittering state banquet yesterday. So apparently today, Trump and Melania are hosting a dinner for Prince Charles and the Duchess. And so it's got all the pomp and ceremony, more pomp, more ceremony. But behind it all, there is this tendency for Donald Trump to go along with the pomp and ceremony with the Queen, but just, preoccupied by petty feuds. And so Trump was out there insulting the London mayor as a loser. Now, here is the interesting thing, though. Sadiq Khan started this. He started this Twitter feud with Donald Trump, and unfortunately, here in the United States, the corporate media, and this article I'm looking at right here is from the New York Slimes, they're focusing only on Trump's replies, making it look like Trump just hauled off on Sadiq Khan without being provoked. And then using it to say that, Trump is not a very effective leader and he's not being a gentleman. And so still, the corporate media, having learned nothing from the embarrassments of times past, they're still out there spinning. Still out there spinning. Now, Sadiq Khan tried to organize a massive protest against Donald Trump. That kind of fizzled. In fact, a lot of the Brits turned out to cheer Trump. And some of the people who were there were saying Sadiq Khan and the media are trying to make it look like all of Great Britain hates Donald Trump. No, it's divided the same as the United States. Some do, some don't. Now, Boris Johnson, who has received great praise from Donald Trump and is touting Trump's endorsement as yet another reason why he should be the next Prime Minister of Britain. But apparently, when the opportunity arose for Boris Johnson to meet Trump, the former foreign secretary said he was really too busy to meet with him. That was a bad move on your part, Boris. I don't think the endorsements are going to continue much here. And apparently, leftists screaming Nazi scum at a Trump supporter before throwing a milkshake at him, assaulting him and shoving him along with a female police officer beside him. That seems to be the new thing, milkshaking. And I heard a story the other day where from now on, fast food restaurants are going to be asked not to sell milkshakes before potentially controversial public appearances. So anyway, and in another indicator of how Britain feels about him, there's a pub in London has renamed itself the Trump Arms in honor of the president's state visit to Great Britain. Okay, well, today is June 4th, and it is the 30th anniversary of the student-led protest in Tiananmen Square, China. And apparently Mike Pompeo was out there flapping his gums and saying that Beijing should mark the June 4th anniversary by releasing all prisoners allegedly jailed for fighting human rights abuses in China. And in particular, Pompeo said that Chinese citizens have been subjected to a new wave of abuses, especially in Xinjiang, where the Communist Party leadership is methodically attempting to strangle the Uyghur culture and stamp out the Islamic faith. Well, China was not very happy about that. The Chinese embassy has said in a statement cited by Reuters that U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's comments on the anniversary were made out of prejudice and arrogance and interfered with China's internal affairs. So on this date in 1989, a student-led protest being held in Beijing's Tiananmen Square was dispersed by the army, leaving, according to officials, over 200 dead and 7,000 injured. But human rights activists have said the death toll was actually in the thousands, some as high as 10,000. Now, do you remember the Tank Man? Was one of the iconic images. These Chinese tanks were coming down the boulevard, heading to Tiananmen Square. This one gentleman just walked out and stood in their way and forced them to stop. And they tried to go around him, and he moved to block them. And finally, some other people came and grabbed him and hauled him away. 30 years on, we never really found out who he was or what happened to him. We don't even know if he's still alive today. But it was definitely a courageous act on his part, and it did create one of the most iconic images of Tiananmen Square. Okay, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Okay, Chinese social media, which is already under strict government control, sort of like we're tending toward here, it's been placed on a lockdown for the anniversary today. And apparently, Tencent Holding Limited's messaging app WeChat and microblogging site Weibo barred users from changing their profile photos and other personal information. Video streaming service Bilibili said it suspended real-time comments and other features for technical upgrades. Now, financial data provider Refinitiv has removed all Reuters news stories from its Icon terminal concerning the 30th anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre. And China has been working throughout the years to try and basically erase Tiananmen from all servers within China. So they just wanted to go away. It was a huge embarrassment here. All righty. Donald Trump has told the Syrian government and its Russian ally to please stop bombing Syria's last rebel-held province, just as Israel launched a second round of air raids against Syria in 24 hours. And hearing word that Russia, Syria, and to a lesser extent Iran are bombing Idlib province in Syria and supposedly indiscriminately killing many innocent civilians, Trump basically came out with a post on Twitter saying, "Stop the butchery, just stop it, just stop it." Well, the Kremlin was quick to respond, saying that it is the militants in Idlib who have stepped up attacks on civilian areas in places like nearby northern Hama, as well as Latakia province. So, blaming Turkey for failing to uphold the Astana ceasefire agreement by allowing its proxies to attack Syrian government areas, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said militants were using Idlib as a base to launch attacks against civilians, and which he called unacceptable. Okay. All right. We're going to take the callers are calling on in. Let's start with Terry in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I want to tell you about the deal I made with Julie this morning. We're going to do a little challenge to the donors, and I gave her my credit card, and what we're going to do is I'm going to match the first $200 total that comes in from all the donors over the next 3 hours. So the next 3 hours, if they call her and tell her they want to donate, I'll match it. In other words, if only $100 comes in over the next 3 hours, I'll give $100, so it'll be $200 total. But if 200 comes in, I'll give 200. If 300 comes in from the donors, I only give 200 because I'm a poor guy. I'm not rich.
Yeah, no, we understand. Still, it's a very, very generous thing for you to do. So let me get that phone number out right now. 800-724-2719, extension 1. And what Terry is doing, he's putting out a fundraising challenge. He will match all the donations that come in over the next 3 hours up to a limit of 200. Do I have that correct?
Okay. Mike, that's 200 total for everybody.
Yes.
Okay, if I had more, I'd do it for each individual, but I can't. So
no. This is a total of $200 over the next 3 hours, but he will match that, and that's an incentive for you to basically call 800-724-2719, extension 1, and make a credit card or debit card donation, which Terry will then match up to a grand aggregate of $200. But you only have 3 hours to do it. So basically, think the end of my show and the introduction to John Stadmiller's show. After that, the deal will be off.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
Well, thank you, Terry. That's a very generous thing for you to do. So let's switch over to Jim in Illinois. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, Michael, two quick stories I want to tell you. I was reading the London paper today. There's a financial service company that handles mutual funds, investments, and people's pensions funds.
Yeah.
They told their customers, you cannot get your money earlier than 28 days, and then it might be indefinite when they can get their money. So is this the beginning of something to start?
Yeah, that is very, very serious when people cannot get their money out.
Right, and that reminds me of what happened back in 2008 with the Royal Bank of Scotland, where people could not get their money. So, and the other story, have you heard about this guy named George Nader, who is a friend of Donald Trump's? His family member knows him. Some of his current and staff members know about him. This is a guy that's in jail right now for dealing in child pornography and transporting child pornography from out of the country into America, and not only child pornography, bestiality. And this is a friend of members of the White House, including the president.
It feels like our entire country is going crazy. And was this guy on prescription antidepressants?
Well, the guy's 60 years old. I don't know, but you know what though? The guy has a lot of influence. He's a money guy, but he's a pervert. He should be in jail, if not castrated.
Yeah, it's it seems like some very seriously ill people or evil people tend to rise to the top. It's like our entire country has become one gigantic cesspool where the really big chunks float to the top.
Right, and the question is, who was he giving this stuff to, and who's protecting this guy? Because apparently he's been doing stuff like this since 1997, and they let him go.
Well, he's got the goods on somebody.
More than somebody, probably a lot of people.
I would imagine so.
Well, Michael,
yeah, that's just.
I'm going to let you go.
Okay.
It's sick.
Yeah, it is.
Take care.
I agree. It's absolutely sick. All right. Well, the phone lines are open now, and don't forget, for the next 3 hours, actually 2 hours, 55 minutes, all donations phoned into RBN to Julie will be matched by Terry in California up to a total aggregate of $200. So once again, that phone number is 800-724-2719, extension 1. So getting on back to the war zones here, Israel has continued its airstrikes against Syria, killing 15 people, and apparently they killed 10 of them early Sunday, and killed 5 more late on Sunday. So the attacks broadly targeted military facilities as well as sites for Syrian air defense. The evening strikes reportedly destroyed a warehouse that was believed to be storing rockets. Israel has not commented on either attack here. All right, we're going to go back to the phones here. Chris in Las Vegas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, Michael, I am like yourself and most Americans very concerned about the abject criminality of the Mueller situation and his past nefariousness and criminality under the guise of being a officer of the court. And being one who studies law very diligently, as I am, I have discovered a term that I think bears critical observation in Black's Law, the law dictionary of the legal trade. And the term is jus, J-U-S, which is the law.
Yes.
You have to look these two terms up separately. And the other part is fecialis. It's spelled two different ways, F-E-T-I-A-L-E-S and F-E-C-I-A-L-E-S. And you might note that the fecialis sounds a lot like feces because it really is a lot of crap, because it's a secret, silent war to absolute destruction of anyone that they can ensnare into their court schemes. And so when you understand that the bar is a militant terrorist operation here in America, sent here to seditiously undermine the Republic, and they've done a fine job of it because they have a complete monopoly on the whole criminal justice system, because there is a bar qualification for the Supreme Court, and that makes it an unconstitutional monopoly in violation of the Smith Act, the Graham-Lanham Act, the Sherman Antitrust Act, the Taft-Hartley Act, and the Pinkerton Act, for those who pay attention.
Well, you could make the same argument that the White House is a monopoly.
Well, the White House was supposed to be an office of the people, and
Yes.
we were supposed to keep them in check. However, under the corporate model of the 1871 D.C. Incorporations Act, corporations are opposite of the people. They live forever. People have a life-termed existence.
Yes.
We don't live forever, so corporations have an advantage over us. And corporate employees or servants or property is a lot easier to control than private people who are supposed to be the sovereigns in this country, according to Chisholm versus Georgia. It talks about the true nature of the people being the precipitators and manufacturers of government here in this country. However, they've inverted the pyramid and turned it upside down. Instead of having the creator at the top, the people below us, subject to the creator, and then a line drawn in the middle of the pyramid with the government agencies below that we're supposed to oversee and supervise, they have now put government at the top of the pyramid and put the people and the creator down below it. And that's what's wrong with our country. We need to reverse the pyramid, to right the country, to turn the ship back upright, and put the people back in control of the government instead of the government controlling the people.
Well, as I've said many times on this program, the curse of political power is that it attracts the very sort of people who should not be allowed to have it. And the Founding Fathers did try and set up a system where the greed and avarice and pride of ambitious people would be held in check. They had the three branches of government. They had checks and balances. But over time, all of those safety mechanisms have been eroded away by the money junkies, by the ambitious. And yeah, what we have today is not at all like what was intended. Chris, you there? Okay, I think we lost Chris. Let's start with Fred in Wisconsin. And Fred, I'm going to take you through a commercial break. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I just talked to John Moore this morning's show, and I brought up this thing about this confirmation of this ATF guy, a former Obama guy, by the Trump administration, who is being endorsed by the NRA. And anyhow, John says this is a bad deal. I kind of got the feeling it was. And he's asking people to call their senators and tell them not to confirm this guy for the head of alcohol, tobacco, and firearms.
Well, you know, I'm seeing all these conflicting stories about him, about how he's pro-gun and anti-gun, and obviously somebody is mounting a propaganda campaign to get him in. We need to find out the real skinny on this guy, because, you know, this would be a huge betrayal by Trump if he put a gun grabber in as head of the ATF. Anyway, Fred, thank you for the information. We're going to have to let you go, take a break for our commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And a reminder that Terry in California very generously has agreed to double donations made before the end of this program, and up to a total aggregate of $200. And the phone number to call Julie and make that credit or debit card donation, pardon me, I got the hiccups again. Whoa. Is 800-724-2719, extension 1. So, alrighty, so we're going to go back to the phones here to Fred. No, we already talked to Fred in Wisconsin. I got to clear the phone lines here. Getting on back to the war zones here. Once again, Syrian government forces have seized Israeli and U.S.-made weapons and ammunition, including American TOW missiles left behind by terrorist outfits in the southern parts of the Arab country. And apparently they had hundreds of thousands of machine gun rounds, some of which is Israeli-made, machine guns of 12.7 millimeter, 14.5 millimeter, and 23 millimeter. And it added that Syrian soldiers also discovered a number of anti-tank missiles, including U.S.-made TOW missiles. And TOW, of course, is an acronym for tube-launched, optically tracked, wire-guided missiles. They are very, very effective. All righty. Now, the European Union is moving toward building a common military, and the U.S. is threatening to leave its allies in a lurch if Brussels continues to insist on cutting U.S. weapons makers out of the bargain. Here's what it's really all about. You know, you will buy our weapons. We'll stay in NATO and give you some money, but you've got to start giving more, and you've got to buy U.S. weapons. Now, over in Turkey, they're saying there is absolutely no turning back on the S-400 missile deal with Russia, point blank saying the U.S. offer is not as good as Russia's offer on the S-400. Russia's doing it the smart way. They've got a better product at a lower price. And that's not how the U.S. operates anymore. It's all about, well, no, we don't care if you're spending more and getting less. You will buy American, or we will give you what for here. Okay, Thursday will be the anniversary, 75th anniversary of the storming of the beaches at Normandy. And already World War II veterans from the U.S. are traveling to France to gather on the beach and sort of reminisce about what happened, to pay tribute to their fallen comrades here. And I imagine that probably over the next couple of days we're going to see a lot of movies about war, and you know, they'll spin it saying, hey, isn't war cool? But of course war is not really cool. And interestingly enough, Virginia State Senator Richard Black, in an interview with Russia Today, he says, U.S. citizens are weary of endless wars. Boy, does he have that one correct. And he warned President Trump about dragging the country into another one with Iran. And he blamed John Bolton for being the top warmonger, and he's got that one correct as well. Iran is not a threat to the United States. Iran has not initiated a war of conquest against another country in over 200 years, and certainly not since the Islamic Revolution of 1979. It's not in their nature. This desire to go to war with Iran is purely to please Israel, which wants to smash up a regional political rival, and to please the private central bankers, because Iran is one of the few countries on earth that still does not have a privately owned central bank. It's there to please the U.S. government, which wants Iran's oil permanently shackled to the U.S. dollar. That's what it's all about, oil and dollars and banking. Iran is not a threat to us. Now, Iran's Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif has lashed out at U.S. economic terrorism against the innocent Iranian people, saying that war, and by this he means economic war, and talks will never go together. So what he's basically saying here is, as long as the U.S. is waging economic war on Iran, the possibility of talks just will not exist. Okay, now last week there was the story that came on out about how 4 oil tankers in the Gulf of Oman were sabotaged by Iran. and it sort of fizzled. Now, maybe if one of the tankers had blown up into a fiery conflagration, that would be different. But apparently, the story only got the most cursory coverage in major news outlets. They all pretty much buried it inside stories about the announced deployment of more troops to the Middle East. And apparently, it's because the reporters who were at the briefing just got the sense there was no proof that Iran had anything to do with it. And I guess they're just as tired of being lied to as the rest of us. We'll be right back. And aloha, Mirko. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phones. And to Tony in Puerto Rico, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, aloha, Mike. I heard you mention the other day that a couple of people with the Ebola virus entered the United States. Is that correct?
Well, that was the story that was being reported. There is certainly a potential, and Ebola has made it to the United States in years past, but it has been successfully contained. The danger here is we're seeing this flood of migrants from parts of Africa where Ebola is rampant, and nobody is giving these people medical checks. Nobody knows how many have gotten through. There was a report that Ebola was detected, but I couldn't get a confirmation on that.
Yeah, and my other question is, why don't they reopen Ellis Island or some similar institution and quarantine these people?
Ellis Island wouldn't be big enough. You know, Ellis Island, when Ellis Island was operational, we were talking about, one cruise ship, ocean crosser, every few weeks. And here we've got literally millions coming across the border. And it's a gigantic flood. That's been the problem all along. All the facilities, whether it's Ellis Island or these tent cities down in Texas or these other centers, they're simply inadequate to deal with the flood. And we know that a lot of very contagious diseases that had previously been eradicated in this country have been reintroduced, which of course is going to make the medical establishment very happy. Oh, we can sell more medicine, we can sell more shots. But if Ebola gets in here, okay, and this one has like about a 60% mortality rate as far as I can calculate, this could get really ugly.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Mike.
All right. Thank you very much for the phone call. So we're talking about this claim that Iran sabotaged these 4 oil tankers, and there really was not a lot of damage done to them. None of them sank. The damage was either all above the waterline or basically into a sealed-off compartment. And according to this article out of antiwar.com, this all came from Mossad. Mossad is the one saying, ooh, Iran did this, Iran did this, Iran did this. And Mossad has, it's another false flag. It is another false flag. So Mossad is saying that Iran managed the attacks. Some U.S. officials are saying it was Iranian sea mines, which is kind of hard to get behind because in at least one case, it was the stern of the ship where the explosion happened. And they don't drive these ships backward. So looking at all of Israel's false flags, remember the motto of the Mossad, by way of deception, thou shalt do war. So let's see. Another article, this one from the original antiwar.com, talking about the view from Tehran and saying, great that there's no war yet, but it's been a few weeks since National Security Advisor John Bolton, who never saw a regime he didn't want to change, reportedly ordered the Pentagon to update plans to send 120,000 additional troops into the Persian Gulf. And all of this preparation and the inherent threat to strike Iran was based on vague and unsubstantiated intelligence that Tehran had planned attacks on U.S. troops in the region. So the usual murky secretive intelligence, anonymous sources, unconfirmable rumors. We've seen this all before. 16 years ago, and it didn't end well. U.S. troops are still in Iraq, and they may be there indefinitely. So we need to remember, yes, we're being lied to, and I guess people are picking up on it, because going on back to that story about how even the U.S. corporate media just didn't want to bother with that story about the 4 tankers. They're tired of being made fools of, because right now they're looking at their ratings, they're looking at their ad revenues, and they're saying, it's time to make a choice. Are we going to go on carrying the propaganda for the U.S. war machine at the risk of going out of business, or are we going to try and treat our audience with respect and win them back? So obviously, I'd like to see the corporate media win their audience back, win their ad revenues back, be truthful, be factual, stop pushing feelings and memes, and just report on the facts. Okay, there had been a story a while back that the USS Abraham Lincoln was getting ready to transit the Strait of Hormuz and go into the Persian Gulf. As of today, it still has not happened, and U.S. Navy officials have declined to discuss why they hadn't gone through the Strait of Hormuz into the Persian Gulf, but they insist they remain ready to launch any mission in the region. Well, that Strait of Hormuz, that is a real choke point. And if Iran has got some ship killer missiles up there, it could be a huge, huge embarrassment. Now, those aircraft carriers, they look very impressive, but they're very large, and they're just sitting ducks, really, for a lot of modern missiles. And I remember all the way back, I think it was like 2002, the Joint Chiefs called in the top Navy admiral and said point blank, if we go to total war, how long will the carriers survive? And the admiral said, a week, maybe 2 weeks if you keep them in port, which was not the answer they wanted to hear. And we're hearing it from a lot of other people say they're outdated. And they can project that they're wonderful weapons against a nation that can't defend itself. But they are vulnerable. Now, today is the last day of Ramadan. And in, shall we say, commemoration of it, there have been more clashes as Jewish settlers enter the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound. And it all started when Jews were allowed entrance to the compound to celebrate Jerusalem Day, which marks Israeli control over the Old City in the aftermath of the June 1967 Six-Day War. And in response to reports that Jewish entrance was imminent, Palestinians began to riot, which included throwing stones, chairs, and objects at the entering police. And reports noted the incident marked the first time in about 3 decades that Jews were allowed access to the compound during the final days of the month of Ramadan. It's a provocation. And maybe they're feeling emboldened by the U.S. formal recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel last year. Okay, the 2018 winner of the Nobel Prize in Chemistry is urging a boycott of a physics competition in Tel Aviv that's coming up in July. George P. Smith and 19 other scientists signed an open letter last week that calls on all students and mentors from all over the world not to participate in the next International Physics Olympiad in Israel and to stand for human rights of the young Palestinian pupils and students, including their right to education. Pardon me. Now, Smith, who's the emeritus professor of biology at the University of Missouri, at least for the moment, won last year's Nobel Prize in Chemistry for his invention of a process to evolve proteins that can be used to develop new medicines. And you know that Smith and these other 19 scientists immediately The universities where they're working are going to be inundated with screams of anti-Semitism, and we're going to withhold funding, and you got to let him go and remove his tenure. Now, Israel is going to become a hot button issue for the 2020 campaign, and we're starting to see indications of that because the Democratic candidates who are out there are all trying to posture themselves that they're becoming critical of Israel. They haven't actually voiced any criticism. In fact, they're still pounding on Palestine, but they're also saying, yeah, there are definitely some. As we reported last week, the Knesset basically dissolved itself, and new elections have been called for in September. And according to this article that's over in unz.com, this signals that Netanyahu's grip on power is slipping. And Netanyahu was forced to dissolve the 120-member parliament to block his chief rival, Benny Gantz, from getting a chance to assemble an alternative governing coalition. Netanyahu's attitude is, if I can't have it, nobody can. Pardon me. And apparently, the ostensible reason for the parliament's dissolution is a standoff between Netanyahu and Avigdor Lieberman, his former defense minister. They've clashed over Lieberman's insistence that ultra-Orthodox Jews be drafted into the army. We all seem to have been victims of fake news yet again. Over the weekend, we talked about this yesterday. The Wall Street Journal reported that Rostec, who trains the Venezuelan troops and offers advice on weapons contracts, cut their numbers to just a few dozen as crisis grips the nation. We were told that they were going home, that they hadn't been paid. Putin basically came on out and said, absolutely not. Russia is not abandoning Maduro. And basically, the Russian ambassador to Venezuela, Vladimir Zimsky, said this is another piece of news which has absolutely nothing to do with reality. Over in Honduras, like I said, the whole world is going crazy. But protesters burned and looted some 30 shipping containers marked with the logo of the Dole Food Company on Sunday. This is the second attack on symbols of U.S. power in the Central American nation in recent days. Now, protests against U.S. allied Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernandez have been building in recent weeks over planned reforms that Hernandez's critics argue will lead to the privatization of public services, which means the services go down and the costs go up. So, everywhere. It's just going on everywhere here. Over in Sudan, protesters say at least 35 have been killed after security forces stormed the main protest camp in the capital, Khartoum, in the worst violence since the overthrow of President Omar al-Bashir, drawing global condemnation. And the Sudanese Professionals Association said Monday's crackdown amounted to a bloody massacre. Pro-democracy leaders have called on people to take part in night marches and block the main roads as part of total civil disobedience to paralyze public life across the country. Boy, those people are not at all happy. Now, you've probably heard about the Stryker Brigade, and they are now upgrading. They're going to convert to a full armored division in preparation for battle with a near peer, meaning Russia or China. So the reflagging ceremony is scheduled for June 20th, and the change involves bringing in new soldiers, refurbishing and refitting equipment and infrastructure at Fort Bliss, Texas, home of the 1st Armored Division. All righty. So let's turn to our domestic politics here. Judicial Watch, boy, I applaud them. They are doing such great work. And apparently they announced yesterday they received an additional 218 pages of Strzok page emails that show FBI counsel James Baker instructing FBI officials to expedite the release of FBI probe material to Hillary Clinton's lawyer in August of 2016, when it could still be used to basically attack Trump going into the election. Now, a little revelation that came on out of this is that Hillary's lawyer wanted to obtain the FD 302 report of the FBI Department of Justice interview of Hillary Clinton. Now, the FD 302 reports are notes FBI officials take to summarize interviews they conduct with an individual. I don't know why in this day and age they're not taking an audio recording. But here it turns out the Strzok page emails show the FBI failed to write FD 302s for at least 4 interviews of witnesses in the Clinton email probe. Can you say cover up? The House of Representatives will vote on June 11th whether or not to hold Attorney General William Barr and former White House counsel Don McGahn in contempt of Congress for his refusal to submit a subpoenaed, unredacted version of the Mueller report to the legislature. So they're piling the pressure onto him as well. Okay. Now, Sean Hannity is out there saying that the Inspector General report is complete. It's been handed over to Attorney General William Barr, and it could be released as early as this week. Okay. The Senate has unanimously approved a bill barring individuals who improperly interfere in U.S. elections from entering the country in a display of legislative virtue signaling. Now, it's unclear who the act is supposed to affect. They named it Deter, Defending Elections Against Trolls from Enemy Regimes, and it sailed through the Senate without a single dissenting vote, buoyed by the bipartisan bluster of its sponsors, Senators Lindsey Graham and Dick Durbin. Now, what are they going to do? Wait until somebody improperly interferes and then say you can't come back? We have to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And Jussie Smollett is back in the news yet again. And no, he does not have his acting career back. Apparently, documents released by the Chicago Police Department show that the office of left-leaning prosecutor Kim Foxx went out of its way to accommodate Jussie Smollett, even going so far as to apologize to his lawyers and work with them to alter the wording of statements to put the actor in a better light. And obviously, this is unethical. The prosecutors let Jussie's lawyers dictate what to say in court. Why does Kim Foxx still have her job? That's what I want to know. Meanwhile, out in California, their state bar is moving to suspend Michael Avenatti's law license, saying he poses a substantial threat of harm to clients or the public. Yes, that's absolutely true. And having been once around the track with the California State Bar myself, I know it's almost impossible to get a lawyer suspended. But it looks like it's going to happen to Avenatti. All right, so let's talk about the economic news. And basically, Trump's trade war has just turned 1 year old. And even if the tariffs went away today completely, the effects will be felt for years to come. Now, apparently there's a new report that China is working to find ways around the U.S. tariffs by shipping their goods from China to the U.S. via Vietnam, Taiwan, and Mexico. And apparently that volume of shipping along that road rose. And it's basically China is altering their supply chains to compensate for the U.S. tariffs. And here's another warning, and please take it to heart due to the cataclysmic flooding that we went through, are still going through. Millions of acres of U.S. farmland will not be planted with crops this year at all. And a lot of those farmers are now applying for the various government subsidies that are made available to not grow crops, to let the fields lie fallow as a form of price support. So they're lining up for that one here. Over at Facebook, things are getting very tense. As you know, last week they had a meeting of the board of directors, who were, of course, unable to vote out Zuckerberg as chairman of the board. But apparently this has prompted an outburst from the outside investors, the ones who are not in management, the ones who are not sitting on the board of directors. And apparently, among them, some 68% of ordinary investors want Zuckerberg ousted as chairman of the board, and they want to bring in an independent figure to chair the board. Last year, it was just 51%. We got to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Getting on back to the economic news. Production lines for Huawei smartphones have reportedly halted in response to the effects of the U.S. blacklisting. This is a report from the South China Morning Post. And apparently the ban by the U.S. has prevented Huawei from accessing supplies that are crucial for international sales, including chips made by Intel and access to Google's Android operating system. The ban may also force Huawei to reassess its goal of becoming the most popular smartphone purveyor by 2020. Well, as far as the chips are concerned, that's going to take a lot of work to get around. As far as the Android operating system, my understanding is Huawei is already working on their own proprietary smartphone operating system. And I would recommend that they go that way, and not just because I don't like Android. Okay, the stock market is up today. It's doing very, very well. Some individual stocks did not do well yesterday. Apparently, the FANG stocks, which stands for Facebook, Apple, Netflix, and Google, they took a major bath, and this is being triggered by fears of a major regulatory crackdown. Possible breaking up of the monopolies. U.S. manufacturing has plunged to the lowest level since the financial crisis fallout back in 2009. So, okay, this is something to be paying attention to. Every single clothing store's stock fell last month, nearly all by double-digit percentages. The indicators are out there, and maybe nobody's talking about it because nobody knows how to fix it. Okay, remember Paul Allen was a big fan of space exploration, and he started this company called Stratolaunch, which built the world's largest airplane by wingspan. But Paul Allen recently passed away, and whoever's taken over his economic empire appears not to want to continue pouring money into this operation, and sources are saying that Stratolaunch is closing its operations, and the assets are being shopped to potential buyers by the parent firm Vulcan. And that includes a portfolio of launch vehicles, including that airplane. So this may be this generation's version of the Spruce Goose. Do you remember Howard Hughes? And he had this contract to build this flying troop transport, and went over budget, as these things tend to do. And he was being investigated by Congress, and they said, we haven't even seen the thing move yet. So Hughes basically taxied it out. It was a flying boat. Taxied it out into Long Beach Harbor, gunned the engines, and basically took it off into the air for about 1 mile at an altitude of, I think it was something like 50 feet. Then he set it back down gently, and that was the end of the Spruce Goose's career. Eventually, it was housed in a museum next to the Queen Mary in Long Beach, and now it's been moved up to an aerospace museum in Oregon. So unless somebody wants to pick up where Stratolaunch left off, it looks like that aircraft is going to be headed for a museum. And it's a shame because it represents an amazing piece of engineering here. Okay, and once again, in arguments over the S-400, Trump has yanked India's preferential trade status. Trump went on down to India and said, "You will buy the S-400." And India said, no, we want to go a different direction. So now India is saying they may retaliate against the U.S. economically. And India might counter the U.S. decision to withdraw a generalized system of preferences on its exports by imposing retaliatory tariffs for the coming month. Just keeps on going. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Joe in Tennessee. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What is on your mind?
Yeah, I just called in a donation, so hopefully get to that $200.
Okay.
A guy in California will match it. But anyway, and I hope somebody else does out there also.
We need it.
Let's get to
RBN needs it. There's no other way to put it. You know, if you don't step up and help, RBN will be gone.
Yeah, we can't let that happen. I mean, this is an important, network, and it's an important place to let our voices be heard. I mean, it's very easy to call in. You just tell them your name and your state, and then you tell them what you want to talk about, and you're on. I mean, it's just a wonderful bit of democracy in a country that's losing its way. And, with all the censorship around and Facebook and all that other stuff, if you say the wrong thing, you're suspended. I get suspended on Facebook all the time,
Yep.
So I got suspended for putting the picture, that yearbook picture that governor put up. I just showed that picture and I got suspended. And this guy's still governor in Virginia, So, but anyway, what I wanted to talk about was, I heard Cher the other day talking about how, Trump belongs in prison with a guy named Bubba, to be his boyfriend.
Yeah.
And it's just another example of like why Trump really has to understand how much they hate him and how much danger him and his family really are in if he does not destroy these people. I mean, I know it's just Cher and she's just running on at the mouth.
Yeah.
But Cher's obviously been given the signal. I mean, all the celebrities have been given the signal. Taylor Swift, and every day it's somebody else, that it's okay to show pictures of yourself with a severed head of Trump, or to say that his son should be molested, or to say things about raping Melania. I mean, this is crossing on that kind of stuff. I never remembered hearing that kind of stuff from any kind of celebrity when Obama was president, or even Bush. And, I think that this is an example of really why Trump, if he thinks that he can be reasonable with these people, he's making a huge mistake. These people are out, and he's got to act that way. And I don't see it. I mean, I really think that, and that's probably, I've been saying really, I think he's going to have to, in order to really clean this country out, I really think we're going to have to go into some form of soft martial law, because these people are incredibly dangerous. They're incredibly powerful. I mean, I'm not talking about Cher, but Cher is getting her directions from someone, Yeah,
Cher, I would agree with that. I would agree with that, because many, many, many years ago, I had an opportunity to work with her, and she wasn't like this back then. Of course, on the other hand, she's a fading star, and maybe this is her way of getting her name back into the media.
Well, they got something. I mean, you don't remember what happened to Sonny Bono. I mean, they basically killed Sonny. I mean, Sonny was a victim of asking too many questions, and he had a skiing accident, right? Wasn't that it?
Yeah.
But,
that tree just leapt out in front of him and smacked him across the face.
Yeah, an expert skier, you know, and he was starting to ask questions about what was it, some kind of a drug running thing, or
yeah,
where was it, child? It was really touching on the real hardcore, you know, unmentionable stuff, you know.
Yes.
he was sniffing around there, and you know, all of a sudden he has that skiing accident. But it's just really kind of the way these people are attacking him is really sickening. It's in a way demonic, and really I just don't know if he appreciates the danger that this represents. I mean, I know it's just share, but share is just an indicator of what's going on, like, in the culture. The amount of hatred, like these Antifa guys, and they're very dangerous, unstable people out there, and they're being, like, egged on by a higher level. I mean, it's not, like I said, in a normal world, Cher would be, like, taken off the air and punished, and her and her publishers would all say, hey, you're not going to get any airtime if you don't knock this stuff out. But now it's actually the opposite. You're getting more promotions, you're getting more invites, you get more. So it's obviously the people at the higher level of this are encouraging it, and that's what Trump needs to really fully understand and grasp. And once again, when you start talking about putting a guy in prison where he's going to, you know, be sodomized by somebody, or his child, or his son, or his grandsons, or whatever, that crosses a line. And I've been waiting for him to really come back. You know, I remember that TV show, I, Claudius.
Yes.
And one time his like wife Messalina's messing around. They're having a big party at some place. And one of the guys is looking over and says, oh, there's a big cloud coming. It's coming from Rome. And next thing you know, it was the Roman army, and they just arrested all of them. And that's kind of what I'd like to see happen in Hollywood, you know, because these people, you know, they're you know, when you go against the king, you better you know, finish the job.
Well,
and
I don't think we need to send
like the king.
I don't think we need to send the army into Hollywood, because after all, they're just image people. But
well, how about sending an army of IRS investigators?
Well,
an army of IRS investigators in. That would do the trick, wouldn't it?
Well,
how much money is in fraud in Hollywood?
You're looking at the wrong target. You're being distracted by the wrong target. We need to keep the focus on the Bush family, the Clinton family, that Clinton Foundation. That is the nexus of all that's been going on. And getting distracted by
I agree with you there.
Getting distracted by what Cher is saying is unproductive.
Well, I'm not really distracted by it. It's just a great indication of how, like, off the rails this whole anti-Trump thing really is, and how much danger he's in. To me, this is an indication. I mean, I remember watching her on TV. Sonny and Cher show was a big, and then Cher had her own show.
Yes.
I mean, it was a big thing, and then have her sitting there wishing the president to be sodomized in prison is shows how off the rails everything's gotten, and she's obviously saying it because she knows that's what they want her to say. You know, I mean, so that's kind of my whole thing about why Hollywood is, you know, and Hollywood is a huge, you know, promotion of what's really going wrong in this country. I mean, it's hard to even take watching TV anymore. It's just all propaganda. It's all this LGBT stuff, anti-white stuff, like crazy feminist stuff. It's always like the bad guy's always some white patriot somewhere, you know. And so I do wish they would go after Hollywood, and you know, it's part of the system that's really against me and mine. So why shouldn't I? You know, personally, I think that send in the IRS, start looking into those Hollywood moguls and the production companies, all the fraud that's involved there.
Oh, there's a lot to find.
Look at Hollywood. Look what Hollywood's doing in Georgia. They pass a law that says, you know, after 6 weeks you can't have an abortion, and they're threatening pullouts, and they're not going to do business there anymore. And they did the same thing like with the gay stuff and the transgender bathrooms. You know, a state passes a law, North Carolina. Oh, next thing you know, no Hollywood, no football. You know, it's like, well, what happened to democracy? You know?
Yeah.
Well, not, you know, only the democracy we like, you know. But if it's not what we like, oh, we're going to boycott you. You're not going to get the NCAA finals. We're not going to get any movies. So some sooner or later we got to stand up against this kind of stuff.
Well, there's no question. There's no question that these celebrities have gotten a little too big for their britches and have forgotten they're not running this country. Supposedly a civil government is in charge of running this country, but they have that bully puppet. They have that fame. Some of the stuff that Jack Nicholson has come out with is just, it's just bordering on the obscene. And something, as somebody who spent a lot of time in Hollywood and used to work in the film business, I'm actually ashamed of these people. It sort of cheapens it when I say I used to work in Hollywood. Oh, so you were hanging out with those people who wanted the president sodomized. Well, no, I left before they were ascendant. But it's sort of a cheapening of the image of Hollywood. Not that Hollywood's image was all that great to begin with, but at least it had a little more glamour to it back in my day, as opposed to today, where it's just this frothing at the mouth, spewing of hate. And again, in the early days of Hollywood, in the early days of Hollywood, anybody saying anything like that, their career would have been over. I mean, you'd be amazed at some of the stuff that was in the contract signed by the contract talent, where it would say, this is how you will dress, this is where you will be seen eating at night. And I mean, they literally fix them up with dates to try and promote the stars of the next movie. It was that tightly controlled, and nobody dared say anything against.
Well, not political. I mean, even in the 20s, they had that period where Hollywood started getting a little bit, racy. I mean, they had nakedness and stuff, and that brought about the Catholic League for.
That brought about the Hayes Commission.
Yeah, but they never attacked really politicians like they do now. I mean, it was they weren't in the tank for one party. I mean, Hollywood and the media are a wing of the Democratic Socialist Party now. I mean,
yes,
they really are. And they've just totally gone to one side. And what I don't understand is why my side doesn't attack them. I mean, the president, I was glad to see today that he attacked CNN and said, why doesn't AT&T do something about this? Because overseas it's embarrassing to see our country being, and I'm glad to see that. But I mean, and that's what I like about Trump is he is attacking the media, and I say make the connection between the media and their corporate ownership also. Like Microsoft. Microsoft does a lot of business with the government. Yep. And here they are they own NBC or MSNBC. And the same way with NBC, isn't GE a part of NBC, and they make jet engines?
Yep.
So how are they attacking the president? And, the president has the ability to say, well, we want Pratt & Whitney in our jet engines in our air. I mean, that's what I would do. I wouldn't announce it, but I'd take the gloves off and going after these guys. They want to take sides, then you got to punish them. I mean, that's simple.
Well,
one of the first rules of politics is reward your friends and punish your enemies.
Yeah,
right?
It is one of the first rules of politics. But in our nation, Trump has to find a way to do it legally and within the framework of the Constitution. And you're right, he should be doing it. I've been saying for months now he needs to put on those presidential brass knuckles. But I'll tell you right now, the longer he goes without fighting back, the more emboldened his enemies are going to be.
Yep, he's got to have to do something. And I saw Schumer on today, and he's talking about Trump's tariffs and how, like he wants the Mexican immigration to there's something wrong with making the Mexicans, protect our border. And I'm just thinking, well, why are you against our border being protected? I could see you saying you're against tariffs, but he wasn't. He's just, it just shows that the Democrats
The Democrats want those open borders because those millions of illegal immigrants coming into the country will be registered as Democratic voters and used to shift the red districts to blue. It happened in California on the midterms. California used to be a solid GOP stronghold. During the midterms, it was a real shock. 4 districts shifted blue.
Well, Trump should be sending busloads of those Africans with Ebola up to Brooklyn and up in that area, New York, and let them blame Schumer when people start getting all these weird African diseases, because I really do think that Trump should, besides the tariffs, Trump should do what he said about busing these people into these sanctuary city areas and let them take care of them, because I see them sprouting out here in eastern Tennessee. I'm like, Syrians and Africans, and Obama was like seeding all these white areas with these people. So let's start sending them off to like these liberal enclaves, maybe like Greenwich, Connecticut, and all these
have you seen how
Hollywood
the liberals
areas
respond? The liberals are saying, no, you send them somewhere else. NIMBY, not in my backyard.
Yeah.
Okay, Joe, I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials here. We're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. We've got a caller waiting on the line, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we've got little over an hour and a half to go on that very generous offer by Terry out in California, where if you will call in a donation to 800-724-2719, extension 1, that he will match it up to a total aggregate of $200. And it was very generous of him to do that. So let's go to the phones here to Jim in New York. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, sir. I just contributed that $200 to your board op. I don't know if he called you or not to tell you that I did match that, and RBN's worth that.
Thank you for saying so.
It's a very good quality radio. You know what I mean? Especially with you. You have a wonderful show, and I just wanted to put it out there. I'll match it.
So you're also going to do I'm sorry, I misunderstood. So you're also going to do a match to donations?
Yes, that's what I did. I just spoke to your board op. I went through the whole contribution.
So that means that from now until the end of the show, if one of our listeners donates $100, you, Jim, will donate $100, and Terry in California will donate $100, in effect tripling the effect of the donation. That is very generous of you.
Yeah, like I said, your caller called up, said 200. I did 200. I don't know what's going on from that point. I don't know. Another 100.
Well, thank you very much for your generosity and for your support. And if we could get this momentum moving. And by the way, as long as we're on the subject, there is one other thing that everybody listening to my voice right now can do. And that is to basically start getting the name RBN out there to the public. We have a decent audience, but we need to grow our audience so that we can grow our ad revenues, and we need to basically start bringing more people into the RBN universe, if you will. Now, you're going to run into people who are saying, oh, it's tinfoil hat, it's kooky stuff. But I imagine you're going to find a lot of people out there who know they're being lied to by the U.S. government and the corporate media. You can always remind them about Saddam's nuclear weapons and just say, if you want to really know what's going on, you go over to the Republic Broadcasting Network, or you go over to whatreallyhappened.com. And we really do need to start asking you to help us with the outreach to grow our audience, because that would help us get the word out, and that would be a good thing. So, Jim, thank you very much. We're going to let you go. Get on back to the news here. We're talking about the economic news here. And apparently, over the past 20 years, the share of Americans working in their 70s has risen from less than 10% to nearly 15%, according to U.S. Census Bureau data. And I don't think they're doing it out of boredom. They're doing it out of economic necessity. And it's another indicator that the economy is doing great for those at the top, that top 1%. The economy is just wonderful. It's just pouring all kinds of treasure all over them. But for ordinary middle and working class Americans, no, it's stagnating. It's grinding to a halt. Okay, let's see. Trump's Mexico tariffs sends gold prices climbing. And yeah, they've gone up sharply the last few days. I think they were a little down today. But for those of you who are playing the metals trade, might be a time to think about selling, holding the cash, wait for it to go back down again. You always buy low and sell high. But if you really, I mean, gold hit a 10-week high of $1,328 per ounce. Now, because the stock market did so well today, I think we can expect that gold went down because the two are inverse. But if you think about it, these tariffs on Mexican imports would be the biggest tax increase on the American people in decades. And if the tariffs ramp up all the way to 25%, as Trump has threatened, that would be the biggest tax increase since 1968. Now, the U.S. and Mexico are beginning talks aimed at avoiding tariffs. In fact, they're going to supposedly meet at the White House tomorrow afternoon. But Mexican President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador says he's confident a deal to avoid tariffs would come out of the talks. Interestingly enough, officials in Mexico are saying the tariffs are actually going to make the migration problem worse. Now, whether that's a prediction or a threat is unclear. Mexico may be thinking, well, if we get hit with tariffs, we'll just get more buses and trucks out there and help these more and more of these illegals get up there. And we got to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And apparently one of the items on the agenda for these talks between the United States and Mexico is the designation of Mexico as a safe third country. Mexico has already said they absolutely would not accept that. We just have this huge population of illegal immigrants and surplus human beings, and now we're just trying to find some corner to jam them into. All right, let's go back to the phones here. David in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Good day to you. Can I make a recommendation?
Sure.
I love your show, and you always bring perfect things to listen to and to meditate over and maybe to act on. But the first second that I hear your voice say, folks, I knock people over to get to my volume knob or my mute.
Okay, well, I was unaware of that. And
let me say, and I think a lot of people probably do. Can you get a little more creative? Maybe have some more people, maybe people who have actually donated to you, and are very happy about it, and say, hey, I donated $100, but man, I'm so happy I did. These guys are still on. You could do the same thing. I mean, get some, personal testimony, something other than you just pitching it, because it's a host pitching it.
Yes.
Get creative with it, because we need to hear. I think people would, everybody's kind of burnt out on this message.
I understand. Yes, I understand. And
it's not that hard to do. Sit down in front of a mic. I saw John pull out right out of his hat in 1 minute a really cool message. I mean, it's, just get out there and do it. We need to hear something different than you just asking for money all the time.
Well, I got to be honest. I hate asking for money. I really do.
I know you do. I know you do. But you don't have to. Let the people ask.
Okay.
Let the guy who just donated $100, they'd be happy to do it. I'll bet they'd line up, be happy to do it. And it'd be more authentic and it'd be real.
That's an excellent idea. That is an excellent idea.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to switch over to Jim in Michigan. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. As far as Trump is concerned, he did win a battle with the courts and the federal courts as far as funding the wall from, other places like it could be the Pentagon or whatever. So he got that.
Yes.
But we're talking about the tariffs now. And I'm thinking the tariffs are, I'm just thinking that the tariffs, he's going to do 5%, he's going to do 10%, he's going to do 20%. But there's like stipulations. And what I have known for years, Michael, is that Mexico has the toughest. You enter into our state without authorization, and you go into detention, you go into prison, you know what I mean? They had all this stuff. And so what's happened there? So what I'm thinking is the Mexican government is actually a person who was working with George Soros in the United Nations right now. What I'm thinking as far as Trump is like, tariffs, well, no big deal, like you were saying. I'm just thinking we should just shut down the damn borders, you know.
That's the obvious solution. Down. Eisenhower did it.
Yeah, just shut them down totally until it chokes Mexico, because they're the ones who are colluding, okay, with Soros and the United Nations to let them in our country. So, like, just screw them. But I don't know if it's going to make Trump look like a dictator, but who cares? You know, it's like we're in real deep doo-doo here,
we
my
don't
friend.
need him to be a dictator. We just need him to enforce the existing laws. Title 8. That's where this is all broken down.
You're right, my friend.
You know,
and I did look at I looked at Breitbart, and there was only like just a few people who were actually prosecuted under Title 8, and there's tons of people who should be prosecuted.
Yes.
So yeah, and I'm looking at cities like, and I'm thinking, and I watched Breitbart, and they were saying they were actually taking these illegals and putting them on jets, okay, and sending them to Florida. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I just saw the devastation as far as human feces in all these 10 cities in LA and San Francisco and stuff. You know, what I think is to do is send them all there, because they're sanctuary cities. Send them all there instead of down into Florida, where people are being overrun there too. But I'm just wondering why the Department of Homeland Security is taking people, okay, on jet planes and then flying them to Florida. That doesn't make no sense to me.
Well, they're being flown to a lot of places.
Take them all and go and send them to. Yeah, but I guess the whole point is send them to L.A. and San Francisco. That's the best place for it.
Well, see, what the Democrats want to do is they want to take all these illegal immigrants who are going to be registered to vote, even though they're not supposed to be, and they can be counted on to vote Democratic, and they basically want to send a whole bunch of these illegals into voting districts that are just slightly red in order to shift them blue. And that's the way they're going to use the illegal immigrants to lock down a Democratic victory in 2020.
Where does the authority come from when those people are a bus or jet planes? I mean, where does it come from? I mean, Trump he's kind of fearless on this issue. The tariff thing, well, you know, no big deal. You have to put more pressure on Mexico, because, again, they had the toughest border laws where you go to prison if you violated their borders. So there is compliance there with Soros there, and I just wish Trump would just go, okay, we're going to shut the damn border down. Really hurt Mexico. Really hurt them bad.
I think
it's
time to declare a national emergency.
Absolutely, but I was listening to Stan Dale. Are you familiar with him?
I've heard the name.
He's a physicist and really a brilliant guy. And I kind of agree with him, and I'm sorry to say this, but I would issue live rounds to border security, and I would say, okay, we're going to shoot in front of you or above you, but if you come over, you're going to be shot, okay? And that's just my opinion, and I don't want to do that, but what I'm just saying is we're in such a national emergency where they're going to actually take our country and take it down. Look at the slums in San Francisco and L.A., where there's typhus and there's cholera and there's tuberculosis, and like going, oh my God, there's nothing going on. So I'm just saying we need to get really tough on the border. And
well, we don't need to use live ammunition, although I understand there have been a couple of incidents involving live ammunition now because the border guards are now being attacked. But there are, we have a very powerful military.
Right.
We have a very powerful military with area denial weapons. That's the category, that's what it's called. And that includes that microwave weapon that makes your skin feel like it's on fire. You've got water cannons. You've got various forms of tear gas. And you could drive these illegal immigrants back from the wall without having to kill or injure them. But in the end, you have to have a wall.
You're right.
You absolutely have to have a wall.
We really do. And I totally agree with you, and I just think Trump is going a long way around the barn to get through the door. He's going around 3 or 4 times. It's like, come on, man. It's like, and I don't know if it's that people are not advising him properly, but I think it's built a damn wall, and they ship all the illegals to San Francisco and L.A. and New York, okay, and without any kind of scrutiny as far as whether they're sick or not, which all of my immigrant parents had to go through in Ellis Island.
Yes.
And yours also. And I'm just thinking, my God, these Democrats are going to toilet our country. They're going to bring in all these diseases we've never had before. Democrats they're just horrible people, my friend. I'm sorry.
Well, they're caught up. They're caught up in this ideology, and they think the ideology can reshape the world around them, and it doesn't work. It's probably the greatest single failure of liberalism, is this idea that the ideology can warp science, psychology, health, and it really doesn't. Anyway, listen,
but
Jim.
They live in mansions. They live in mansions, Michael, and they have armed guards. So. Not like us.
All right. Well, Jim, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go and switch over to Steve Elkins. Aloha, Steve. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, yeah, I just want to comment on what your last caller just said, and that's true. They were supposed to ship the illegals down to South Florida, but Governor Rick DeSantis caught that and found out what was going on and stopped it. Didn't happen. But what is interesting is that President Trump said he had no knowledge of this was happening, and what agency, somebody in the agency was actually superseding him. He had no knowledge this was happening, which is not a good thing to say, because you're the President of the United States. You're supposed to know what's going on. So that was a really it's a lame thing to say, a lame excuse to say I didn't know. But other than that, I just got an email here, pop-up story I just sent over to you. It was interesting that the deputy on duty during the Parkland school shooting is now being hit with 11 charges, including child neglect, negligence, and perjury for hiding during the massacre that claimed 17 lives. He now faces a possibility up to 96 years behind bars. And you may want to talk about that a little bit. Which is interesting is that if this ever goes to court, if I am correct, the Sheriff Scott Israel had actually had a stand-down order for 3 officers, told them not to enter the building, but for some reason, this guy was supposed to go in by himself. So I think if that ever makes it into the courtroom, it's not going to look too good of why a stand-down order for 3 officers, but allow this guy to go in, which led me to the belief, the possibility that this guy may have been set up to take the fall anyway, because a dead officer would help the gun-grabbing agenda even more so.
Yes, absolutely. No question about it.
And he may have been set up, and he just didn't fall into the trap of entering a school and getting gunned down and killed himself, because, like I said, that would have helped the agenda quite a bit more to have a law enforcement officer killed in the line of duty, too. So.
Yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense. And now, has the stand-down order been confirmed as actually being real? Because there's a lot of misinformation floating around.
Well, it was a while back. I remember reading it that the officer, Scott Israel, actually, he was relieved of duty now, too.
Yeah.
So he's been fired. So that'll be interesting if you bring everybody in court and the transcripts of saying stand down. I'm sure they have records of that. If that's true, and I think it is, then Scott Peterson was being set up for the fall, which would have helped the agenda.
He would have been the bloody shirt.
Yeah, he would have been. Well, that's something to think about. Like I said, I sent the article over to you. Take a look at it.
I just posted it.
All right. I'll talk to you soon. Hey, thanks, man.
All right, thanks a lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open. I just got an email from somebody who's donated $20 to RBN and expressing thanks to the caller from California. So it's working. It's out there. Okay, as I think it was 2, maybe 3 callers ago mentioned, a federal judge on Monday denied a House request to prevent Donald Trump from tapping Defense Department money for his proposed border wall with Mexico, saying that Congress lacked authority to sue. U.S. District Judge Trevor McFadden wrote that the House's lawsuit was about whether one chamber of Congress has the constitutional means to conscript the judiciary in a political turf war with the president over the implementation of legislation. Now that is going to be an amazing legal precedent that can be cited to maybe tamp down on all these ridiculous lawsuits where every time Trump does something, oh no, we've got to sue, we've got to prevent it, because that's not what the judiciary is for. Congress's job is to pass the laws. The president's job is to enforce the laws. The Supreme Court's job is to make sure those laws conform the Constitution and not get into this constant infighting with each other. Pardon me. Okay. Apparently, Mexico is ferrying around illegal aliens to different places along the border to kind of spread them out so they'll avoid the bad optics of crossing all in one big unit. This is coming from the executive director of the Center of Immigration Studies. So yeah, Mexico is fully on board with this. They're getting illegals bus tickets to different places along the border where they can cross. Because yeah, there's this huge lump of humanity crossing over. It does look bad, and it does underscore how critical the situation is. And once again, we're getting this from Conservative View. Customs and Border Protection announced the first large group of people from Africa were apprehended in the Del Rio sector of Texas. In total, 116 individuals were apprehended. 80 came from the Congo. So I hope that somebody is down there with an antibodies test and isolation gear. And as I mentioned earlier in the show, there have been a couple of incidents of Ebola here in the United States, but it was detected, they were put in isolation, it was basically dealt with. But 80? And that's not counting all the ones who got by without being arrested. This is just fraught with peril. Over in Great Britain, the Brexit Party has topped the Westminster polls for the first time, and it could translate to 306 seats in the House of Commons, only 20 short of a majority. So that's getting intense over there. Meanwhile, Change UK is on the verge of collapse in the wake of the party's humiliating failure at the European elections. Multiple resignations now confirmed. And since its establishment in February, the breakaway party has stumbled through blunder after blunder. As many as 5 of the party's 11 members of parliament want to disband the party, with many looking to merge with the Liberal Democrats. So I think that will end talk of a second referendum. Okay, we got to take another break for commercials here. We'll be right back after these few words, so stay tuned. And aloha America, welcome back to our show. And basically, they're having their elections in Denmark tomorrow, and Mette Frederiksen is expected to win, and she's campaigned on an anti-immigration platform. And basically, the lady's got flair. When she marked her return on Facebook, it was a video of Quentin Tarantino buttoning her jacket, arranging her hair, slipping on stiletto heels to heavy metal music. "I'm ready again," she declared to the camera. "Let's get this bus rolling." Well, that's certainly going to leave an impression in people's minds here. And apparently she was in the hospital with food poisoning when the Prime Minister, Lars Løkke Rasmussen, called a general election last week and was 2 days late joining the campaign. But apparently she's caught up. She's got the momentum, and few are doubting she'll become Denmark's youngest ever prime minister after the election tomorrow. Okay. There's been a new development in the Julian Assange case. The Swedish court has ruled that Assange should not be extradited to Sweden for a revived rape investigation. And the ruling by the Uppsala District Court doesn't mean the preliminary investigation must be abandoned, only that Assange won't be returned to Sweden anytime soon. Well, let's look at what's going on. The rape charge fell apart because it looked like it was a false allegation, and everybody was wondering why Sweden decided to try and revive it. Some were thinking that Sweden was thinking if they could get Assange into their country, he might be better off than if he was returned to the United States. But I imagine that the only thing that makes any sense here is that somebody in Washington, D.C. Called somebody over there in Denmark and said, you get out of our way because we are getting Assange. And we're going to make an example of him. Article out of Journal Neo titled The Murdering of Julian Assange. And it basically says this case goes even further than breaking all the rules of democratic free speech. And the way he's being treated is a serious infraction on human rights. The U.S. and British governments intend to silence and punish a champion of free speech, torturing him for all the world to see, especially as a deterrent for would-be whistleblowers and other free speech advocates. And that's exactly what they're trying to do. These authoritarian governments around the world, thanks to the internet and independent media, they've lost their ability to lie to the public with impunity, and they want to get it on back. And the only way they can get it on back is to silence everybody who's got a different piece of information or a different point of view or a different theory. All right, there's the music. We're going to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we're going to go to the phones to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Dustin,
hey, Mike,
are you... There you are.
Yeah, how you doing, Mike?
You're on the
Mike, I was wondering... what Joe from Tennessee doesn't seem to understand is, like, you're dealing with a machine, man, that's worldwide. Like, you're going up against something that's, like, bigger than when Kennedy was around, basically. I mean, this is like Theresa May said, a rules-based international order. That's it. It's a neoliberal world order, so there's more involved than just dealing with people over here because... Remember, Christopher Steele was from MI5, and he was part of the dirty dossier. And this is a worldwide phenomenon going on. The same with the immigration problem that's going on all around the world. So, you're dealing with a machine here,
Yeah.
And then on...
It's called politics.
And yeah, but Mike, and then on the immigration thing, I have to disagree with... dropping them off in Florida and San Francisco... They're still in the country. Like, you can't do that because if you have them on the bus, then you ship them out. Like, why would you move them around like a chessboard in your country? Because they're still in your country. They could just be moved out of San Francisco and into the rural area of California or the panhandle of Florida. So that just don't make any sense for people saying we should just dump them here or there. That's stupid. That's just, they're still going to be in your country.
Yes.
So it doesn't fix anything. And then, Mike, on I think I told you this the other day. On RT, they're talking about how Malaysia wants an Asian gold-backed currency.
Yes, we talked about that the other day.
China, yeah, but China wants that too. So can you So you're looking at right now as we're speaking, like there's shift going on here. Like, I mean, this whole we're isolating ourselves to be making America great again, protectionist or Americanism, and that they talk about that on the Duran. If you go, it's called Trade Wars. Trump builds a tariff wall, but at the end of the show, they talk about how, well, if that happens, what happens to the world's reserve currency? We're going to lose that. And we live off that. Our whole way of life is built off that model, because just like we export our garbage, just like Canada, we export our debt. People buy our debt. Yes, they do. Right? I mean, so, but how would that work out then? Like, if we lose the world's reserve currency, like, our whole way of life will just shrink by like half at least. I mean, it's just no way.
Look at how our standard of living has declined in the last 2 decades here. We're already not the country that we used to be. And by the way, the Malaysian proposal is for a pan-Asian gold-backed currency, not just for Malaysia itself, but for the neighboring countries as well. And they would all agree to use it. Again, it's a shot, at the U.S. dollar. And by the way, the dollar is no longer the world's, the reserve currency. It's now considered a part of a basket of currencies that are used for international foreign exchange. But its preeminence within that basket is very much in decline. And you're absolutely right. If the rest of the world drops the dollar, that's going to be a major body check against the U.S. economy, because the United States became very dependent on that Bretton Woods agreement to keep the money just flowing into the country without having to really give much of anything back for it, except, maybe ink and paper.
Yeah, that's what gives us, like, the ability to print money out of thin air. Like, we have 10 aircraft carriers, 800 military bases around the world, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. If we all have to pay for it ourselves, like, in this country, there's not enough tax revenue, like, to pay the debt off and all these other. It would take us decades to get back to where we actually were, Yes. And I'm not talking about World War II era. I'm talking about, because we would just decline too much. That's why I think it's too late. That's why I keep saying, everybody calls me negative. It's too late, because it's just, unfortunately, globalism with all the supply chains linking around the world, it's like, I think it's too late. I don't know. I could be wrong, but like, I just don't know. I just can't see us like losing that reserve status and keeping our lifestyle as we know it now.
Yeah, but again,
I just don't.
Look at how our lifestyle has already declined, and I'm not just talking about individuals. Look at what's going on in all these cities with all the homelessness and the trash and everything. It's because they don't have the money to clean it up. This is an empire very much in decline right now, and it's because our manufacturing, we don't make anything people want to buy. Nobody wants our agriculture, which is going to be in short supply this autumn anyway because of the floods. We're in serious trouble here, and all our government can think of doing is starting wars on other countries, because they can't think of anything else, and they're hoping that if they can get into a really big war, we, the American people, will forget who got us into this mess, and we'll go along with the chants about those gosh darn Chinese and those gosh darn Russians and those gosh darn Iranians, and yes, no sacrifice is too great to get those evil people, not realizing that the sacrifice is to try and pick up the pieces and glue an economy back together.
And I'm like, right, I got the last thing I got to say, speaking of Russians. If you go, everybody go on YouTube, on RT, and on the uploads, it's about 4 or 5 in. It's Russia's anti-ballistic final test. I never seen anything like this, Mike. You have to watch it on break or when you have time. It's a real quick video.
Okay.
It's amazing. I never seen anything that fast before.
Could you email me the URL?
Have a good show. Okay, it's like I said, it's on RT Uploads. It's just the fourth video in on YouTube.
Okay, but it would help me if you could send the URL. So
okay.
Thank you for the phone call, and we're going to let you go. The phone lines are open. And we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. So getting on back here, article came out of Investment Watch blog, time for conservatives to get ruthless fighting for free speech. And it's basically going on about how liberals are leading the charge for more censorship because they've basically lost the battle of ideas. The American people don't like their ideas because they understand who would be asked to pay for the liberal utopia. And so they want to ban our ideas so that people can't hear about an alternative. So, and we have all these large media, social media companies like YouTube and Google and FaceTime, that their executives are all heavy liberals, and they're perfectly okay with this idea. We can censor conservative voices because we serve a higher purpose. Forget about the First Amendment, forget about fairness, and forget about honesty and ethics and morality. We serve the God of liberalism, and that makes everything that we do okay. So liberals love censorship. They really, really do. Okay, a little bit of good news. There is that pro-life movie. It's called Unplanned, and it won the K-Love Fan Award. It beat 4 other movies to take the prize at the K-Love 2019 Fan Awards at the Grand Ole Opry in Nashville, Tennessee. And it's kind of ironic because earlier this year, K-Love prohibited advertising for the movie, claiming the film was too political and that the station avoids promoting R-rated movies. The network did an about-face, however, after there was a serious public outcry. Now, Rachel Maddow, who's in terminal decline, and I guess all the corporate media is, apparently CNN's ratings dropped by double digits last month. Rachel Maddow is out there saying that there needs to be an abortion underground railroad to defy the pro-life laws. And she's trying to compare having abortions to freeing slaves. That's a pretty desperate reach out there. And Nikki Haley, of course, has gone on the warpath against the idea that being pro-life is anti-woman. And she says it's not real feminism. And being pro-life is not anti-women because roughly half of those fetuses are women in the making. Okay, story out of InfoWars. America's blue cities have become cesspools of filth and disease. And they're talking about piles of garbage, the homeless epidemic, the rats, the feces in the street, the drug needles, and it's all these Democrat-run major cities. And as I said, the reason they can't clean it up, they don't have the money. Liberalism only works until you run out of money, and they've run out of money. And having been to so many of these cities in the past and looking at photos of them as they are today, it's heartbreaking. It's absolutely heartbreaking to see these once beautiful cities that were icons of America to the rest of the world. But not anymore. The rest of the world is now looking at what's going on in these cities and saying, yes, the United States is clearly a nation in decline, headed for collapse. Okay, Dr. Drew Pinsky, he's a longtime Los Angeles resident, radio personality, basically was on a recent episode of the Ingram Angle and says Los Angeles is collapsing into third world health status. And the filth of progressivism has become undeniable. And he says it's headed for a complete breakdown. There's rampant illegal immigration, homelessness, rodent infestation, infectious diseases. These are just a few of the many serious problems afflicting today's Los Angeles. And in the eyes of Dr. Pinsky, the California Mecca is now in many ways worse off than many third world countries because of it all. Pinsky stated, "We have a complete breakdown of the basic needs of civilization in Los Angeles." What a heartbreak here. Apparently, the Los Angeles Police Department cops are so angry over the filthy conditions at their downtown station, some are planning to revolt. Okay. Homelessness has jumped 12% in Los Angeles County and 16% in the city itself over the last year. This is the number of people living on the streets, living in their vehicles, or living in shelters. Anyway. Okay. Pardon me. Article from Natural News talking about a study that was published back in 2006 by the Journal of National Cancer Institute. Reported that 61% of women who were treated with chemotherapy for breast cancer were hospitalized in the year following for a variety of reasons. The researchers found that in the year following the women's initial diagnosis, the women on chemotherapy were much more likely to be hospitalized or go to the emergency room for any cause. Only 42% of the women not being treated with chemo went to the ER or were hospitalized, compared to 61% of the chemo patients. Most of the hospitalizations were for fever and infections or for low blood cell counts and dehydration. Basically, they're saying that conventional cancer treatments can be as dangerous as the disease itself. And I got to watch my mother succumb to cancer treatment. And to this day, I'm not sure she died of the cancer so much as the cancer treatment, because they hit her with both chemotherapy and radiation. And it just tore her up. Absolutely. A more recent study conducted by the Albert Einstein College of Medicine of Yeshiva University in New York found that chemotherapy often increases the aggressiveness of cancer cells, causing tumors to spread throughout the body. But hey, it makes money, and that's really all that matters, isn't it? The cancer industry. Okay. Now, last year, Chinese researcher He Jiankui shocked the scientific community. He had artificially conceived, genetically manipulated identical twin girls who were supposed to be resistant to HIV. And it drew criticism from the science community, questions about the ethics. The Chinese government got involved. And now there's a new study that confirms these identical twins have a significantly shorter life expectancy because of the genes that this doctor tampered with. There's an oopsie. I can imagine that the vaccine industry and the medical industrial complex are getting frustrated at the growth of the anti-vaccine movement, and they're trying very hard to continue to force their products on you with all these laws and all these states about how your child has to have 41 shots before they can go to school, and now they want to have adult vaccines. And a big part of it is how many vaccines there are, how many shots you have to have, and that you have to have a booster shot down the road. So now they're changing their marketing technique, and they're coming on out with this idea that they're developing a super vaccine that will be all the immunizations in one shot that will last for your entire life. Going to cost a lot of money, but really, wouldn't it be better to just have the one shot and write us out a big check than have to come back to the clinic for this jab and that jab and that jab and so forth and so on? Personally, given how much they've botched up with the existing vaccines, I don't think so. And don't forget, the reason this may not be true is that, just to take influenza, for example, new strains of influenza are always evolving that require a new flu vaccine. So already we know there are going to be some additional shots down the road at regular periodic intervals. Now, this next story shows how the medical industrial complex is trying to consolidate its market share, if you will, or dominate the market. There is a new lawsuit by the Center for Inquiry that alleges Walmart is committing wide-scale consumer fraud and endangering the health of its customers through its sale and marketing of fake medicine. Now, what they mean by fake medicine is homeopathic medicines. The lawsuit was filed in the District of Columbia last month. CFI is also involved in a similar lawsuit against CVS that's been going on since June of 2018. Walmart sells homeopathics right alongside real medicines in the same sections of the store under the same signs. So this guy who's behind all of this is CFI's Vice President General Counsel, Nicholas Little. And I wonder how many pharmaceutical stocks from the big pharmaceutical corporations are in his portfolio. So there are a lot of people who trust the homeopathic products a lot more than the conventional medications. And for good reason. I mean, if you watch those glitzy, expensive commercials on TV where they're touting the latest thing, you know, Humitra or whatever it is, and there's always that voice at the end talking very, very fast about how dangerous this drug is, that's going to scare off people who listen to that. You don't get those warnings on homeopathic products. You really don't. Okay, we're going to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back. Aloha America, welcome back to our show here. And it strikes me that I don't watch a lot of TV, but I do watch some. And boy, there certainly are a lot more commercials than there were when I was a kid. And I've noticed there's this one medication, and I can't remember the name of it, which shows you how effective the commercials are. But it seems to be being prescribed for a lot of things like psoriasis and a bunch of other illnesses, all of which have to do with the immune system. And just to throw a wild theory out there, I'm wondering if all these people who have things like psoriasis are vaccine damaged. And the pharmaceutical corporations, rather than saying, ooh, gee, we damaged you, we're sorry, they just come up with another medication to treat the symptoms of the vaccine damage. And I hate to be such a cynic in my old age, but these are very cynical times where bad, dangerous, unsafe products are being sold to us. Anyway. Now, apparently Fox News finally, and it's only been 5 years, Fox News finally came on out talking about the situation in Fukushima, Japan, and describing it as completely out of control, and saying that the radiation levels at Fukushima were now at unimaginable levels. Now, I remember when that first happened, and there was this story that came on out from the Japanese media with this incredible high number for the radiation count. And then 24 hours later, it had been chopped down to something that wasn't as scary. And they said, oh, one of our scientists made a mistake with a calculator. And I never really bought that one because I've worked with radiation meters before. You don't need a calculator. You just turn on the radiation meter, you read the number, and there you are. So, what a mess they've made of this planet. Okay, article coming on out from Natural News again. And it says that tech giants are now pushing anti-knowledge to try and keep humanity dumbed down and trapped in a mental prison. And far from helping people access knowledge and facts, search engines like Google are now pushing anti-knowledge. They're pushing feelings and agendas, which is why, frankly, you should be using DuckDuckGo. And the tech giants are systematically deplatforming all channels and sources of real human knowledge, awakening, and truth. For the topics that really matter, the only information that's allowed to be found on Google, Wikipedia, iPhone apps, YouTube, or Twitter is the anti-knowledge or false facts that basically protect corporate profitability and the political class. And that's issues of science, medicine, vaccines. I mean, look how hard they're still pushing for human-caused global warming, even as we've had yet another record-setting winter in a row. Anyway. Apparently, Italian scientists did a study and discovered that the performance of students who used Twitter drops by up to 40%. Now, I don't think it has to do with melting the brains or anything, but especially with that enforced brevity, it is responsible for a drop in the quality of a public discourse. And researchers found that Twitter use among students correlated with a drop in test results of between 25 and 40%. So parents, you might want to limit your kids' time on Twitter. Experts say the drop was most noticeable among higher achieving students, and that the use of social networking sites had impaired their performance. So basically the finding is confirming social media is not the best place for a well-informed discussion. And of course, that was the great promise of the internet. On the day when the ARPANET became the internet, everybody said, this is going to be wonderful. Instantaneous communication, the sharing of ideas. We had Usenet, where people could post articles of any length on any subject. And it was just an incredible rush of freedom. And even back then, you could just see people in the government saying, uh-oh, this could be a problem. Because the internet was never intended to be available to the general public. Not a lot of people realize this. When the Defense Department's Advanced Research Projects Agency set up the ARPANET, it was supposed to be confined to military establishments, government offices, and those university departments that were working on weapons contracts. But what started happening as people left those universities, they took connections with them. Anyway, I'll give you the rest of the story after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And I've just been informed that Julie had to take off unexpectedly. So if you still want to make a credit card or debit card donation to RBN, the number is 800-724-2719, extension 3. And that'll put you right into the control room, and they'll get you taken care of. Okay, so we're talking about the origins of the internet and how it just dynamically changed the flow of information in our society. When DARPA first created the DARPANET, it was not for public consumption. But as scientists who were involved in these university programs left to join the private sector, they would basically arrange to take along an internet connection. It was just too good to leave behind. And so it reached a point in the 70s where the government was getting very, very nervous about this growing, uncensorable, because that's the way it was designed to be, means of peer-to-peer communication. So when they came around with the funding to the operators of the so-called backbone machines, they said there are going to be some new rules. And that is that private citizens are not allowed to access this. And to their credit, the companies running the backbone machines said, you can keep your check, we'll pay for it from now on. That was the day the ARPANET became the internet, and it broke free into the public. And again, it was just this amazing, wonderful system with email and Usenet, FTP, remote login, and even back then, the government was getting very nervous. People can mass communicate with other people, and we can't control it. And there was one attempt, the Communications Decency Act, that was about a quarter of a century ago. And they tried to sell that one to the American people by flooding Usenet with all of this porn. Now, if you understood Usenet had dedicated areas for that kind of traffic. It was called the alt hierarchy, as in alternative. But these posters were posting pornography into cooking sites and refinishing furniture sites, and the people in those categories kept saying, look, this doesn't belong here. You need to go over to the alt hierarchy. And the people posting the porn would say, I have a First Amendment right to put this porn anywhere I want. So some experts started tracking back on the IP addresses where all the porn was coming from and discovered it was coming from military servers. So they went into Congress with this Communications Decency Act, and Senator Exxon had his Exxon Amendment, which was highlighted by a blue binder, which contained, the same pictures that were being poured onto Usenet. And the bill was passed, the Exxon Amendment was voted down, and like a switch, the porn flood stopped, demonstrating it had been a psyop. So, now Usenet is no longer with us, unfortunately, because there were too many copyright violations, but while it was around, it was a wonderful way to share your favorite photos. I mean, this is all in the days before, Facebook and the modern incarnations. But you need to understand, back then, it was all peer-to-peer. There was no central filtering authority. There was no place where you could put down a machine and start censoring it. It was designed that way in order to survive a nuclear attack. And what we have seen come on since the 1980s is the rise of the Googles, the Facebooks, the Twitter, which in fact centralize all the communication in a way that can be censored and filtered. And that's the reason they are supported so much by the government, and they don't want, uncontrollable peer-to-peer communication. All right, there is a new scam out, and it's a phishing campaign. It pretends to be from the Office 365 team, warning you that your email account cancellation has been approved and that all of your email will be deleted unless you cancel the request within the hour. And of course, when you click on the cancel button, you open up your machine to an attack. Microsoft has issued another warning to patch the wormable Blue Keep flaw. This is the second warning for users of older Windows releases to patch their systems to block potential attackers from abusing the critical remote desktop services remote code execution vulnerability dubbed Blue Keep. And of course, remote execution desktop is a security weakness in and of itself. And as of right now, they have not seen this vulnerability incorporated into malware, but nobody wants to bet it's going to stay that way. I think we mentioned this last week. I think we mentioned this on Friday when we were talking about Claire. But apparently there is a cyber defense summit to be held this October, and the keynote speaker is going to be former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. She of the unsecured private email server in her home. Boy, she's got to be desperate for audiences here. The amount of snow blanketing the Sierra Nevada is even larger than the 2017 snowpack that pulled the state out of a 5-year drought. As of last Thursday, the snowpack measured 202% of average after a barrage of storms throughout winter and spring, according to the Department of Water Resources. So they're going to have plenty of water, but it's just another reminder. We got a lot of snow this last winter. And by the way, we are hearing from down in Australia that winter has come early there, and that they're getting snow much earlier in the season than would normally be the case. Over in Indonesia, the Agung volcano has started erupting. The aviation color code was raised to red, which means stay away, because you don't want to fly an aircraft through all of that fine glass pumice, which is what volcanic ash is. And apparently there's been a new eruption near the summit of Mount Etna in Italy. And 2 new eruptive fissures have opened early May 30th on the northern and southeastern sides of the new southeast crater, producing modest strombolian activity and small lava flows. Now, a lot of people are getting very, very nervous about Italy because it's been revealed that yet another supervolcano lurks deep underneath what would be considered the toe of the Italian boot. So, okay. Apparently over in Kentucky, emergency crews are responding to a possible explosive. There's a video up at whatreallyhappened.com where they're basically sending in the little robot to see if they can determine what's going on. They're saying the vehicle has all the appropriate markings to be there, including warnings that it's got explosives on board. But for some reason, the police and the FBI got very suspicious, and they're taking a look at it. Apparently, the U.S. Senate is going to vote on Senator Paul's balanced budget plan. I'm predicting this one will go down in flames. Congress doesn't want to balance the budget. If the budget's balanced, it means less money for their pork barrel projects into their own districts with which to buy votes. Okay. Apple's new computer is out. It's their new Mac Pro. It's a $5,000 machine. And it's got a very spacey looking casing that people are already poking fun at because it looks like a giant cheese grater. And so people are out there saying, make Apple great again. For those of you who are iTunes fans, apparently Apple has decided iTunes is about to go away. And instead of this integrated media center, they're going to have 3 dedicated, isolated apps, one specifically for music, one specifically for videos, one specifically for podcasts. Obviously, the App Store will still be there, but apparently the business model of selling music over iTunes didn't turn out to be the huge flood of cash everybody thought it was going to be. Well, this day and age, people just don't have it. People just don't have the money. So, liberals have come up with a new way to fight human-caused global warming. They want everybody to use pogo sticks. No, they're being serious. It's eco-friendly. It's emission-free. Yeah, pogo sticks. At my age, are you kidding? Alrighty, over in Alabama, lawmakers have passed a bill requiring chemical castration of convicted child molesters. Yes, 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 I'm in agreement. Little update here on Paul Manafort. Paul Manafort, who's Trump's former campaign manager, he's serving a federal prison sentence. It's being reported he's going to be transferred to the Rikers Island jail complex in New York City, where he's most likely going to be held in isolation while facing state fraud charges. I think if he were just not connected to Trump, I don't think they would put him in isolation. He doesn't need to be in isolation. But apparently Manafort, it's like that earlier caller said, you've got these people who are close to the president and look what they're doing. Paul Manafort was convicted last year on federal bank fraud, tax, and conspiracy charges in 2 related cases. He's serving a 7.5-year federal prison sentence in Pennsylvania. And the Manhattan District Attorney obtained an indictment of Mr. Manafort on state mortgage fraud charges in an effort to ensure he will still face prison if Trump pardoned him for his federal crimes. Man, oh man, oh man. Okay, Carnival Cruise Lines has been hit with a $20 million fine after it was caught once again dumping trash into the ocean. Now, those cruise ships, they're wonderful places, but they're built on a budget, and sometimes they just don't have room for all the trash. And I know that because when I was in my magic career phase, I did a summer on the Mississippi Queen, which was a steamboat that went out of New Orleans up to Vicksburg and back once a week. And sometimes dealing with the trash did get to be a problem because we couldn't just throw it in the Mississippi River, although it was very obvious looking out the porthole that a lot of other people were. But we had to just jam it in corners until we got back to our dock, and after the passengers got off and weren't there to see it, we'd just all be lugging it out and putting it in the bins there. But yeah, $20 million fine. That is pretty bad here. Okay. A government watchdog says the FBI has access to about 640 million photographs, including from driver's licenses, passports, and mugshots that could be searched using facial recognition technology. Well, boy, I have changed a lot since my driver's license and passport were taken, and I've never had a mugshot. But it shows how this technology is just spinning out of control, and it's very intrusive. And my concern is, so far, I haven't seen facial recognition technology that is 100% accurate. We're always hearing about these stories about false positives, about people who miss their plane flights because the facial recognition said, oh, they're this person. So 640 million photographs in a nation with a population of only 300 million. It's like the law of the hammer. If you give a small child a hammer, everything they encounter needs pounding. If you give the government computer technology, everything they encounter needs to be computerized. False on both counts. Some things don't need computers. And we don't need computers until the technology is robust and mature and guaranteed to work, which it is not right now. Okay. Over in Korea, one of the special envoys to the U.S., Kim Hyok Choi, was not executed as the media widely claimed, and North Korea's top nuclear negotiator, Kim Young Choi, who the media widely reported was sent to a labor camp, was pictured attending a musical with Kim Jong-un. So it's more fake news. I mean, we're being flooded. I mean, the fake news has hit tsunami stage. I'm not surprised CNN's ratings have dropped by double digits. Who would even bother to watch that anymore? For the commercials? We are the most lied to people on the face of this earth. We really are. Okay, we were talking before about how students who are on Twitter too much, we're seeing their academic scores decline. And here's another article that asks if parents are spending too much time on their devices. And it can be a problem. According to a new study by Common Sense, teens are more likely to say that their parents spend too much time on their devices than the other way around. Now that's counterintuitive. I would tend to think that parents are going to say, put down that iPhone, that iPad, go outside and play. But apparently it's the other way around, where it's the kids who are saying the parents are spending too much time on their devices. And, I'll be honest, Claire and I, we love our iPhones and our iPads. And, we're constantly having to say, let's put these down for the rest of the day and watch some really terrible TV reruns of programs we have already seen 20 times before. So apparently in this new report, about half the teens surveyed think their parents spend too much time on the devices. Back in 2016, only about 30% of teens said that. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. Back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Last segment of our program today. And I want to start out by saying thank you to everybody who called in during the show to make a donation. I don't know the exact number, but I'm told that it was significant. And that's every bit helps. It really does. So again, thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I know that John Stadmiller is going to thank you, and all of RBN is going to thank you, because we're hanging on by our fingernails out here. Okay, so a lot of news is just coming on in here. Apparently, congressional Republicans, in fact, are looking at finding a way to block President Trump's Mexican tariffs. Apparently, Russian tariffs are good, Chinese tariffs are good, Mexican tariffs are not good. And let me just get this out of the way. Okay. But it almost seems like the separation of the three branches of government is getting very, very blurred, and each is intruding very much onto the other. And we need to go back to the original book and say, who has the authority to declare a tariff? Is it Congress? And if not, then Congress has got nothing to say about it. But we're seeing Congress more and more try to go to the court system to interfere with Donald Trump. They're paralyzing him. And with him, they're paralyzing our entire country. And that's perhaps one of the most frustrating things about being an observer of current events. Everybody's talking. Everybody's shouting words at each other. Everybody's screaming about how we want Trump in a prison cell with Bubba and the rest of it. But our nation continues to decline, and nothing is being done about it. And I don't know about you, I'm getting sick and tired of the talk. Talk. We know they're going to start the talks with Mexico about the tariffs tomorrow at the White House. And I'm not expecting anything to be accomplished. They've been talking about the border wall for ages. That's not being accomplished. I still want to find out what happened there back in the 1990s when Congress passed a bill to fund 700 miles of wall, of which only 30 was built. And I want to know who gave the order to stop and where that money went. But this country is clearly in trouble. It is clearly in trouble. And it seems like those who would be in a position to do something about it, they're disinterested. They're off dealing with their own agendas and, their donors and their supporters. So you can't let a ship sail without somebody's hand on that helm. Doesn't work that way. Okay, I've just been told that Mark Anderson will be filling in for John today. So here's the end of our show. There's the music. Stay tuned for Mark. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Thanks again to everybody who donated. You did make a difference, and we really do appreciate it greatly. So we'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.